I know it sounds like a threat that I'm recording you, but this is literally the purpose of what we're doing right now. Never forget that.
So you're threatening me for 90 episodes now? Is that what
That's
you're
right.
saying?
I'm
Gee,
getting compromat on you, my friend.
send me to the podcast gulag.
Oh, listen, you've earned your spot there many episodes ago.
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland Volt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, James Erlinson.
Hey, JM, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roland. I'm having a good time, relaxing, enjoying myself. No, I'm kidding. I'm just busy as heck. Every day's kind of a crazy day, but that's okay. I kind of bargained for that. I've taken on a new role and it has consumed my every waking hour. But hey, listen, if I can do something I love and get paid for it, isn't that what we're all supposed to want, right? Tell me about
Shall,
you. What are you doing that you get paid for that you love?
shall I feel sorry for you now, JM? Is that
No, no,
is that
no.
crying on a
The
very
dog
high
that caught the
level
mail
or
truck, right?
oh yeah, and the dog doesn't know what to do with it. But hey, thanks for asking. I'm doing fine. We're recording this on a holiday, which
We
actually should
are.
be slow. But we will see how the rest of the day will play out on this. But I'm super happy because we're talking about one of the topics that I think a lot of organizations will face in the future. And I've worked on a couple of those. So what we gonna talk today about is one of our favorite episode topics, a user story. And in this case, we're
Hey.
talking about legacy modernization. And we're super happy to have a guest on the show today, Kastin Deal. And we will learn a lot about what you can and cannot do and should not do and how things work out or work not out. But either way, Kerstin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for
Hooray.
having me. I'm super appreciative. Thank you guys. I'm happy to be back on camera. This is where I belong. I'm from Hollywood, so let's go.
Well, Hollywood friend, it's time to do your own profile. And we'd like to get our audience a chance to know you before we talk really about the meat of the subject here. So first, let's start with your professional bona fides. Tell us about your career and what led you here into this knowledge you're going to share today.
My career has started with the US Navy. So I started probably about in 1999. I'm not going to age myself as an engineer. And that was kind of like my first taste of being able to read diagrams. And then from there, I was able to, finish the Navy, started working for BAE Systems. And BAE Systems, they had a Six Sigma project, like a certification. And so I was, interested in Six Sigma at the time. I was able to, start doing, process flow mapping. And that really was what started me um, in a BA space. From there, I've worked, mostly for like transportation type of industries, whether it be a train, a plane. I also even worked for a bike company one time. So it's always been, going forward, continuously moving something. Um, I would say another part of my career, I've done a lot of like project management, project engineering, but where my heart lies really is in business architecture and enterprise architecture, being able to align from a strategic perspective, pinpoint, an area of the business or area of technology that we want to flesh out, through in enterprise. And I've been the forerunner of that and a lot of different companies that I work for. So thank you for having me again.
Hey, that's perfect. And obviously, before we go into the meat of the content, can you tell us a little bit about you as a person? The usual things like social security number and no, just kidding, hobbies and interests and bucket lists and all that type of stuff.
Okay. Just for me as a person, I would say, just if you I guess, ask me who I was in my 20s, it'd be different. My 30s would be different. Now in my 40s, I am a younger, more improved Black Martha Stewart. That's where I am today. I love all things gardening, cooking, um, setting up a good barbecue, Southern cookout type of party. That's where I am now. I also I love to go to sporting events. I'm repping my Dodgers today. I went to the Olympics last year. This year, I really want to, since I'm just newly moved to Dallas, I definitely want to support some of the WNBA games. We had the first round draft picked a couple of days ago. I forget the woman's name. Sorry, but yeah, I'm just, definitely, I'm a sports fanatic. It doesn't matter which sport, really. I love the concept and the idea of competition. Two opponents, going against something. So yeah, that's who I am.
I love it.
Wonderful.
And listen, when we talk about competition, one of the things we're going to talk about a lot today sort of feeds into that, right? So it's a good idea to sort of change tacks and start talking about our episode today because it's on legacy modernization. And first and foremost, let's define the term. What is that practice of legacy modernization all about? And and then why do people pursue legacy modernization? It might be very obvious to people who are in the space, but I'd like
Mhm.
to hear from your perspective what it's all about.
For me, I'd say every few years we have a new term for something. We had process improvement back in the day. I'd say maybe about 3, 4 years ago, we got business transformation going on. And then now, with AI coming in, it's legacy modernization. So for me, it's kind of, a reoccurring theme, but ultimately it is enabling not communities, but enabling companies to be able to prepare itself for new innovation and new technology. Going from a legacy system, a legacy into like landscape, and being able to, I guess how would I say, being able to set the stage for new innovation. That's what I believe legacy modernization is. It's really being able to set the stage, within your enterprise, for new technology.
So, if I would be half cruel, I heard definitions of legacy is everything that works. Um, so when you look at it,
Yeah.
how would you define it? Is it a technology thing? Is it like, oh yeah, you have that old mainframe in the basement, or
hmm
you have any technology that's older than 18 months? What is
hmm
your definition of legacy? When does something become legacy, quote unquote, in your mind?
Um, that's a great question because to me, it's from a few different areas. Number one, legacy as a culture. I mean, we can start from a cultural perspective. It is when people get comfortable in doing something in the same way that they've been doing for a few years.
Hmm.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When you try to kind of like, for me, this is all of my perspective. When you try to kind of like hold on to something, because it's comfortable for you, to me, that's when it starts to become a legacy. Um, but from a technology, perspective, I believe a legacy is, I don't want to put like a negative connotation on it because to me sometimes newer is not always better fit for a company.
Yeah.
But from a legacy perspective, when it comes to technology, it is um placing, I guess, a technology in a space that really isn't as competitive as your other competitors are doing, whether that be, going into AI, going into Azure, going to the cloud. In your tech, your competitors are ideally, being more efficient and faster and more scalable. I think that's when things become, a legacy when you are, kind of a little bit behind that curve.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea that you're looking at what you want to try and do and seeing whether the technology you have today allows you to innovate that direction.
So
Whether it just
yeah,
works to keep the lights on or whether it works to help you challenge the market and beat
yeah,
your competitors at some of the core use cases your customers are looking for, or how to operate your business better. I see a lot of companies talking about legacy like modernization in the context of mainframe because
mhm,
frankly that's just a lot of money people are spending, particularly in the financial services space, to keep the lights on with a very hard to actually like innovate on. It's really just to operate the business. And I feel like there's that conversation is happening over and over about quote unquote legacy modernization. But
yeah.
besides the capabilities, tell me about some of the benefits that people like would directly get as a result of looking to modernize their legacy systems and, as you mentioned, their legacy culture.
Sure. One of the key, I guess, aspects of legacy modernization is user experience. And that kind of also feeds into the culture. When you bring in, whether that be uh, API integration, a different, user interface, anything to cloud, anything to make it, more efficient and more user friendly. To me, that kind of also embeds itself into the culture, of so the where your people are able to say, okay, you know what, I appreciate I've been doing this for the past 7 or 8 years, but this new thing, although I do have to do a little bit of training, it feels more comfortable for me, and that's kind of how you change the mindset, culturally, and then also you're changing the technology in itself. So that's for me what a good benefit of legacy modernization is.
Yeah, you see me thinking. I have so many thoughts
I
right
can see
now.
you thinking.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't think
It's
It's
too
not
the
hard to
hard.
wooden
see you
wheels,
thinking.
the
And
wooden
Oh, there's
wheels in
smoke.
here start to turn, Yeah, 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 yeah. And then the hay starts to burn and you see stuff out of my ears.
Rowan, it's not hard to see you thinking. You don't have no hair, brother.
Yeah, that's true. The gun, it burned off. It burned off already. No, but in all seriousness, so when I think about, I like the idea of user experience for obvious reasons. What I'm
Mhm.
thinking is, and I know we have two more points that we want to talk about this, right? But
Yeah.
what I'm thinking is, what is the criteria? Because if I just see the new shiny thing, right, that's great. But as everybody who listens to the show knows, I'm a little bit, I don't know, skeptical, cynical, whatever, for all the new
Uh-huh.
stuff that comes out, and I want to see it. What is the actual benefit of it? So let's continue with the other benefits that you see, but I want you to keep in the back of your mind, like, okay, this is the criteria that I would apply to say, oh yeah, now I have this thing, this process, this technology, this whatever experience, and I want to have it changed, um, because if you label something as legacy, it always has that negative connotation, which I don't think it deserves. Like I said before, legacy is what works. It's there
Yeah,
for a reason.
exactly.
Yeah, but let's talk about the other 2 points in our little cheat sheet that we have, where you see benefits of the modernization. So user experience is one. What are the other 2, in your opinion?
One of the other ones was scalability and flexibility.
Mhm,
Um, so just just looking at like if going from like on-prem to a cloud, in terms of having the legacy system, or going into a cloud system, the scalability and the flexibility of that type of technology really enables an organization to be able to number one, become more secure,
mhm,
from a cloud perspective. Another thing that I guess that's a benefit is being able to like access, from my perspective, and just from my experience, when things, are ideally modernized, there's sometimes to me the access level is a little bit easier, and I think from my for if you are, going into a legacy understanding, the access should be a lot easier for you to, to attain whatever information you need out of what system. Also, data utilization.
Hmm.
That was one of the things, one of the key points that we mentioned here. Being able to really get inside of that data, look at your insights, reporting. That's one of the really true benefits of legacy modernization. Ideally, if that's on your agenda for legacy modernization, is to really look at your insights of your data of what that particular process is doing, um, et cetera. So I would definitely say data utilization and scalability as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I see a lot with with modernization, when you talk about scalability, is cost. We think about
Hmm.
MIPS, millions of instructions per second on things like mainframes. Those are incredibly expensive. And let's say a process was a part of how your business operated at a certain scale, and congratulations, you've grown. You've like 10x this business. Suddenly, that cost suddenly explodes in a very similar fashion. You want to widen the gap between the amount you charge for your services and the cost it takes to deliver those services. Part of the way you want to do is offboard things from your mainframe or optimize your processes. And the way you can't do that is by trying to solve the problem with the problem itself. Like you can't do that by just doing more legacy system work. You need to be able to modernize your stack by bringing other pieces in. And so when we talk about scalability, like an organization looking to scale is always eyeing cost. And I feel like using an approach to modernize your whole stack really results in like specifically financial value to the organization that they can put on a balance sheet, that they can see, that they can report back onto their investors. That's good, right? The other thing about this is data utilization. I talk about this with all my customers, is that people have so much business data that they're letting sit fallow, like letting the fields just be growing nothing for a season or many seasons or forever because they have no way to use that data effectively. And they can't get any insights that they can act on from it. I feel like this is an example where you're designing both an application and a data ecosystem in parallel, right? To understand what information you have where and how you're going to more effectively use it. And the way you're doing it today, the legacy systems at work, chances are they're not going to be able to exploit that in a way that is valuable. So the question is that I want to come to here is about how what we do factors into this. Because when I'm thinking about like business and business architecture, process architecture, enterprise architecture,
Hmm.
tell me about where we support with our practice that practice of legacy modernization.
Sure. I would say in our practice, we are the architects or who enable the view of all things, whether that be what roles are doing what, within what systems, within what infrastructure, uh, identifying what application interfaces, what I guess data objects are aligned to what business objects. So being able to provide the view in itself for me is where we come into play. Without us providing that view and that the governance and the ability to be able to analyze what's actually happening, truly, I don't think that a legacy project would be as successful. So I think that's really where our strong point and where we come to play.
Yeah, I think we like to call this on this show here two things. One is obviously getting the visibility, right, to see what's out there,
Hmm.
to see where the problems are and whatnot. But then obviously analyzing it and coming up with the better future state, and start
Yeah,
the
sure.
conversation around, well, is that what we want? You know, on this. What is your opinion on the role of architects in that context? What have you seen done? Um, recommend people to look at besides obviously the strategic alignment.
I've worked with a lot of different companies, and the marriage between business architecture and enterprise architecture hasn't always been there.
Hmm.
But the menage a trois of business architecture, enterprise architecture, and solution architecture. I think those three players together, because the solution architecture is being able to identify, you know, what technology is out there that could kind of, help and, really bring us to that, modernization, from just a pure technology perspective. The business architecture perspective is showing our just kind of opening up and showing what people are currently doing, and aligning that um, future state to that solution architecture as well. Um, EA also, aligning, showing, what the actual landscape of the enterprise is doing, but then also aligning that to what a solution architect would be able to, propose. So I think the three key players, I think that's how legacy modernization is a bit different, where you have, three key players as opposed to maybe a business transformation project would probably only need, a BA for sure and maybe EA, but
Yeah.
it depends. It depends on how deep you want that transformation as well. Cause I think
Yeah.
solution architecture is always needed as well.
Yeah, one of the struggles that I see, and I've worked on those projects, and I wish I had a good answer by myself. One of the struggles that I see in those projects is to define the ultimate outcome. Don't want to say end state because
Mm.
you will never reach an end state. It's always a flux. But to say, hey, we have a vision. We think we need to take our products, our IT infrastructure, our processes, and do something completely differently, right?
Mhm.
And I see organizations, and again, I struggled with that myself, coming up with that because you always get distracted by um, the shiny new toy. Oh,
Mhm.
what is the hot thing? And these days it's
Mhm.
AI. Uh,
Mhm.
Before that, it was whatever, no code. Before that, it was standardization via ERP, whatever the
Mhm.
latest and greatest fancy thing is. I
Mhm.
think where architects can have a good impact is if they don't have, like me, good ideas how that end state looks like, but they can definitely help on uh, figuring out the way to get there. Have you seen that? That role of architects, and what were your experiences in figuring out that shiny beacon on the hill state and how to get there?
There is a need for business relationship management and IT project management in as well. Because I think from our architecture's perspective, our role is to really provide that transparency, and then also the idea of, what the new thing looks like, but but being really closely aligned to a business relationship management team,
Mhm.
who has a good understanding of how the business, the has a good understanding about the stakeholders in the first place, has a good understanding about budget as well. Sometimes the shiny new thing really, isn't on, our budget today, or maybe next year. Um, and then also with IT PMO, being able to have like some sort of governed phasing, to ensure that the project is going through a some sort of governance. I believe that all now we have five players that works together. I don't think that from what I've seen, in my career, things that are that are quite successful. Um, it is I don't think that architects should be in the role to deliver a a roadmap
Mhm.
without seeking IT project, PMO, and business relationship management guidance.
Yeah, and I think that the really important point here is architects as an island are way less effective. You need an architect network of stakeholders, of collaborators. Your community around you, in some ways, matters as much as the work that you do yourself. And I love that we want to talk more about this, like how it affects the business, how we help to change, evolve, modernize the way that we do business, particularly starting with the systems that we use. But we're going to take a break very soon to ask a question to our audience and then come back with some actual solutions on how you get there. Meanwhile, audience, what systems do you use in your daily work? What practices do you use? And how many of them are legacy? Keeping the lights on, they've been around forever, everyone knows how they work. They're sort of comfortable, like a nice couch you've had for years. But think about, do they actually still serve you the way that you want them to? Do they help you innovate? Do they help you challenge the market? And what might you need to do to modernize your legacy? We'll come back for us after a short break with our second section, the how.
And welcome back. Hey, Kastin, awesome conversation. Obviously, I know it will be better in our second segment, because now we will drill down a little bit deeper into the how. When I think about the audience of this podcast here, people working in architecture groups, BPM groups, EA groups, whatever, right? Being very interested in the topics that we talk about. I like to continue our conversation about the role of architects. We spoke high level about what they're supposed to do, but would love to drill down into the dirty details. When you do legacy modernization, well, what would be the view that you would have if you get staffed on a project as the architect? What would be your perspective that you would take on, and what would you create, and what would be your approach?
Sure, sure, sure. No, thank you. I would say there are different types of views for different types of modernization projects.
Mhm.
So for a UI project, just a business process view, whether that be like a BPMN understanding, being able to view the process, being able to properly use all of your business objects and your data objects to be able to really have that full transparent view in a business process model, your current state, get a good understanding from either your vendor, your solution architect, for your future state, and kind of like analyze the pain points and develop the countermeasures, in that middle space,
Mhm.
um, of what is, what are your current pain points, and why is, there's a lot of different, like whether that be, wait time or process redundancy, but being able to be truthful about the process. Um, I would say for UI project for sure, your business process model, your old school BPMN. Um, then I would say for any type of data utilization, maybe a what is it called, like a business information diagram.
Mhm.
Once you have your process really fleshed out, with all of your different business objects, etc. Being able to pull those objects and really understand the data, underneath that, whether that be, your different tables that you would need to fetch, to pull that type of data analysis, aligning it to those business objects, so your data objects aligned to a business object. That for me would be able to provide, just that data picture, and get that insight of, where to report and how to report, and what is important about in that business, that business process, about reporting, so just the important aspects of it, who manages that data, that's why aligning that, that data picture to your business process model is really important, Mostly also, I mean, because I don't, because I think that's one of the hardest things is to, when you're going through these type of modernization projects, from a data utilization standpoint, is getting an understanding of who truly owns that data. Sometimes there will be a hole or a gap in the process. And so sometimes you'll find that no one controls that data, that's why you haven't had those insights because the data's just been sitting out there. Um, so that would be, a data view of that would be another view. And then lastly, for your scalability and providing flexibility, to a modernization project, you would have something called like a software user slash task user view. And that is, just seeing the whole picture, that, and to me, that kind of like is the marriage between um, business architecture and enterprise architecture. So being able to really see, all of your roles assigned to a particular task, your stop and end points, your entry and exit points of a process. Also, being able to attach those data objects as your business objects, attaching your application interfaces and your services, having that full view of just what's happening, that way that way you can identify, okay, well, if I need to change, I need to change this particular interface. I need to pull these different new tables. So being able to really provide that, that flexibility, that
Hmm.
would be something that I would use.
Interesting. So I'm hearing this whole like lineage of things you're looking to do. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Number one is you're gathering a lot of information from across the business. So I've heard applications that are there. I've heard different roles that are there, the processes that you're looking to use, and that you're trying to stitch it all together. I've also heard you use views and viewpoints. From what I know, that often implies the use of a framework and a modeling methodology like Archimate. Is that something that you're familiar with putting together? So Archimate is good. It can be good for crossing those domains. Like you talked about, how do you connect business architecture and enterprise architecture? Well, first you need to have both, and then you need to have the glue that brings both together. And the application usage viewpoint, an Archimate model type, is interesting. Tell me about the levers of change. So we've got an architecture view for scalability, we have an architecture view for data utilization, and we have the user experience view, often something that might be represented by the process model. How do these Are these the levers for change? How do you define a future state that you want? And how do you effectively communicate that future state back to those stakeholders who have given up a lot of their data information to you in order to serve your architecture needs?
Well, I would say, what was the aim in the first place? That's having a strategic view, that to me kind of ties everything all into together, to, I guess, answer the question of your why. Without having a strategic view of just the objective for that next 3 to 5 years, without having, this is where we bring in our roadmap. um that's something also that's important as well.
And you use the strategic view to like trigger projects. Like you would use that to be like the onus by which someone would actually invest in this. And so when
Exactly.
they trigger a project, my question is, what changes? Like you've got a bunch of diagrams. I would argue you have a bunch of business data. What does a project do to that data?
Exactly. I would say that the project will pinpoint the data that is relevant for the actual outcome of the project. Not just because we have data, we have a view of data. Not all data is relevant to a particular objective, to a particular project or program. So being able to fully understand the aims or the outcomes of a project or a strategic view understanding where, you know, lies the data to be able to provide insight, for that project. I think that kind of to me is a it's a skill set, being able to um articulate, where this strategic view is going all the way down to that data point, to be able to provide that insight. That's definitely a skill set that would be, a person who's an IT strategist or something. So, and that's our sixth person that we would bring into play here.
It's a whole family.
Yeah, it's a whole family.
Yeah, I'm thinking about graphics that I created for the book, where I put in all the people who are involved in a program, and I thought, oh damn, I ran out of space. It takes a village to do all these different things, and I think organizations like to underestimate that. But I like to switch topics a little bit because, and now I drop the curtain here and out myself. I look in our little cheat sheet and I see an Archimate diagram in here, and I've never used one in a real project. I played with it and I said, yeah, I can do whatever strategy and processes and apps and whatnot in one view. But I honestly have never seen that being used in a real life project. It was all people dabbling with it. But obviously, when I look at your little example that you put in our little cheat sheet, that seems to be something that you might want to use. So where where do you see the benefit of Archimate? And I'm talking about maybe the notation um, over a more, say, traditional way of decomposing it, and say you have a process diagram and an application diagram and many data diagrams. But where do you see the benefit of using a combined notation like Archimate for this?
What Archimedes specifically has helped me to do is to be able to marry the business with the IT concepts. And from my perspective, from a BA perspective, I can use, a Visio diagram, an Eris diagram, a Salonis diagram, to be able to properly, how do I say, to properly, translate and visualize a process. But Archimate, when you use it in Archimate, I think it has a better uptick with other IT, roles. So your solution architects will be able to, to come in and further expand upon your your diagram or create their own, and that's when it's more IT specific, IT specific views. So that's one thing I like about Archimate is being able to take those those business architecture diagrams, but then flow that all the way down to your your application diagrams, your infrastructure diagrams. So that's I think that's the difference with Archimate. It has it has a deeper way of reaching, your solution architects.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with that, because what I've seen is a lot of silos. You know, oh, my job was to create this diagram. Good
Hmm.
luck, guys. You know,
Yeah.
none of my business. Oh no, we have that principle that thou shall not use this applicate whatever, right? So you
Hmm.
have those people in their little camps being entrenched in there, and I think
Yeah.
that doesn't help. So using something that literally forces them to go to the safe page and find an agreement
Hmm.
is something that I think is very important for solution architectures, and to be quite honest, for organizations in general. Because otherwise you're just playing games with each other and you get a suboptimal outcome. But hey, I I'd like to play a little bit of the timekeeper here. Um, I do have one more question for you. Um, and that is the point. Yes, we bring people together. Yes, we may work together. But the question is, where to focus, right? What is your advice for your inspired team of different architects that have the big kumbaya and say, yeah, let's work on something together. But obviously, every one of us is biased and has their own little agenda. So how do you bring those um, different teams, different players together to say, oh yeah, this is what we want to focus on?
The discussion always starts at your business architecture, your business process. Um, that to me is where the key focus point should be. Once there's, I mean, there is a lot of, I think, upward, I say other different levels, from your strategic level and how that flows down to your different capabilities. Blah, blah. There's a lot more upwards that business architects are involved in that really don't necessarily really purely talk to the IT aspect yet. But I think that just that conversation starter is always at the business architecture, business process level 3, level 4 level, and that is where the meats and potatoes really start to happen. Remember I told you I'm Martha Stewart. I like to talk about meats and potatoes. So I think the business architecture aspect is definitely the meats and potatoes of it.
I like that business architecture as meat and potatoes. And the last piece of the puzzle, obviously, from my perspective, is governing all of this. And if you don't have people bought in and brought in, then you are going to have an empty room within which to make decisions, and that leads to some questionable outcomes. But let's turn this back to our audience. So, audience, we've talked about a bunch of viewpoints. Have any of you used Archimate? If not, how do you marry business architecture and enterprise architecture? Is it a type of diagram? Is it a type of spreadsheet? Is it a type of thing kept in your head? And what's been effective and what's maybe missed the mark? We'll leave you for a moment to think about your past, and we'll come back with our final thoughts and conclusions for the episode.
And welcome back. Kastin, very, 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 very interesting conversation. And I loved your drive to bring people together and have them not in silos and all that stuff, because I think that's a lot of what architecture is about. Put away your ego, put away your specialty, have a clear focus on what you want to accomplish, and then contribute to it as a team. Love that. I'm pretty sure there's other people out there who love that as well. And of course, the question of the day is, how can people reach you if they want to continue the conversation with you?
Sure. Well, one of the things you could do is you can hit me up on LinkedIn under Kastin Deal. I have a beautiful profile picture of me with the gardener behind me, during one of my speeches. So you hit me up there. Also, my email is kastindeal@gmail.com. And I would love to, further have this conversation going. I mean, we're architects and we have one another's back. So please hit me up.
That's wonderful to hear. And in fact, we have all of y'all's back, and you can hit us up at hello@whatsyourbaseline.com. Thank you so much for all of our friends joining us on this journey. Thank you, Cass, and that was fantastic. We've been trying to schedule stuff for a little while, and I'm glad we finally get to do it. For everyone out there in podcast land, please make sure to do all of the things we're going to ask you, like, share, tell your friends. I mean, give us feedback, comment on LinkedIn, all the kinds of things that will help us with the algorithm, and also helping us to reach more folks just like Kastin and yourselves who love architecture and process management and want to see more great information shared about that, discussions happening, and ultimately everyone getting a little bit better. But in the meantime, you can visit the website, whatsyourbaseline.com, or specifically for this episode, whatsyourbaseline.com/episode 90. But for now, I've been J.M. Erlinson,
I'm Kastin Deal.
And my name is Roland Volt.
and we will see you in the next one.